welcome everyone. And my name is William Chen. I'm a visiting faculty at Industrial Design Department, and we have Albert Shum here. Albert is a career designer leader, recently retired, just retired from Microsoft, right? And
Wow, it's
yeah,
actually
as a corporate vice president of design. He has over 25 years of global consumer brand design development expertise, and Albert has led strategic innovations initiatives across many many teams across different disciplinary, and scaling design thinking and launching products that influenced tons of people. Yeah, and we have Albert today. His talk title is Navigating Design During the Time of Change. So let's hear about that, and I will come back during the Q&A session. So I'm going to slide out of the frame right now.
Thank you, William, and thank you all for joining me in the studio audience. And it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. And every time someone introduces me as being retired, I feel like so old. Like, but also like it's such a privilege to have be able to actually have time to spend with amazing people like yourself and making new connections. And to me, that's the most rewarding part, is just meeting new creative people with a passion to make things happen. So that said, navigating design during time of change. And I picked this title because there's so much going on in our lives. And I do feel like, it's really important to take stock about how you're all feeling and recognize that with so much going on, sometimes it's hard to make time even for ourselves. And so I really appreciate you taking your time, because time is so valuable to spend with me. And also sometimes when people ask me, how are you feeling, I have this kind of natural response like, hey, I'm doing fine. But in reality, in the back of my mind, it's like there's just so much processing. It's just, and maybe that's why I appreciate, this morning I had a chance to drive from Chicago to Champaign and just like take that time and take the long way, take the long road, I guess. Was that 55? Was that the 57? Yeah, it was just beautiful, just being out in the fields, and I stopped by this little cafe, the Hummingbird Cafe, on the way. It was just nice to find new places, and I think part of, for me, design's always been about seeing the world and in different perspective, taking it all in. So I'm feeling fine, but at the same time, I feel like I constantly have to remind myself to take stock and appreciate what we have and what we get to do. But also, when I'm presenting, like I do have this, and I don't know if you teach this to students, like no matter what stage you are in your career, the imposter syndrome never goes away. I think it's just the nature of being designers and creators. We tend to have this kind of perfectionist, like, oh, we could always make it better. The project is due tomorrow. Like, you work till the last minute to make it even better, and we tend to have the sense you always try to have the answer, whereas as all of us know, it's getting harder and harder to have the answer, and it's not about the answer, but it's really about having a framework, a mindset, an approach to see the best path forward. And that's why in this talk it's about navigating change. It's not giving you the answer, but about how do you find that path for yourself. And for my path, my journey, it's and when I always love like reading autobiographies and people presenting their journey. It seems so like everything just kind of worked out. And as we all know, life takes its strange turns. And even though the slide probably shows like, I was born in Hong Kong, but my dad and mom decided to emigrate when I was about 8, 9 years old. And I actually didn't have a say, because you're 8 or 9, you kind of like, you have to go. You can't put your foot down. It's like, no, I'm not moving to like Canada. And that's where we ended up. And actually, it wasn't like the fun part of Canada. Now I'm going to get a lot of hate mail. We moved to Winnipeg. And anyone been to Winnipeg here? No, it's like Fargo except colder. You can imagine that. Like it makes Illinois winter seems like tropical. But really, it was a great place to grow up, and similarly, like to the Midwest, you could just roam around and go outdoors, ride your bike, and leave your door unlocked kind of place, which seems so nostalgic now, I guess. But I learned to appreciate, again, moving from one culture to another culture, just a whole new language, actually. I just remember, like, when I landed and started school, like, wow, winter, like, you have to, like, wear, like, these big giant suits. My parents got me snowmobile suits. I don't know why. But it was like so weird. But also I remember showing up in school one day and everyone was all dressed up in different costumes. And like it was like astronaut cowboys and I was like, hey, what are you dressed up as? I'm nothing. I'm just me. And it was Halloween. I'd never heard of Halloween. And it reminds me like context and culture is such a big part of design. And maybe that's why I became a designer. Just seeing the world in a different lens. Because that led me to think about like that new lens, that new perspective. I really was interested in how things work. I took things apart. I remember having, again, I'm going to date myself. I had this Sony Walkman. It was like a yellow Walkman. It was a beautiful, like how did it work? You put a cassette in and play music, and I would make my own tapes. So it really dawned on me this little device unlocked this magic of music, and I could take my music with me anywhere. So it was such a formative product that influenced me, but also music and culture. My big influence when I was growing up in high school, and I got into like art, was actually through album covers. And most of you don't even know album covers. It was like, I remember I was collected a lot of like Neville Brody like album covers from Factory Records. It was just beautiful designs. And those were kind of the influence that got me into art, but also I think the technology of listening to music on a Walkman, taking things apart, led me to like, hey, I want to make products like that. And back then, I didn't even know what design was. There was no design program. When I said like, hey, I want to go make those products, people said, oh, you should go into engineering, and that was the kind of the path. And so my undergrad was in mechanical engineering at Waterloo, where I'd learned that actually you don't design versus you solve a lot of problem sets. Like they don't even get to define the problem. They give you the problem, and then you figure out the answer is, and which was great. I think from helping me like have that rigor and that foundation to analyze the problem and then find a solution. But I felt like there was something missing. That hey, like I don't want to just be given the problem. I want to figure out what to make and what can be a better solution. So that led me the path to find a design program that kind of nurtured both that science, engineering, but also the art part. And so I ended up at the product design school at Stanford with David Kelly and Ralph Asti and Matt Kahn. And it was truly a interdisciplinary, kind of a left brain, right brain approach to design and making. And it was grounded on need finding and user-centered design. And that opened up my eyes to like, wow, design can be so much more than just a thing. That you're really trying to figure out how to, in some ways, adapt technology to create better solutions for people's needs, not just to make more things. So that really opened my eye, and from there I worked in a couple of startups. But my friend and I had our own agency, like we all do when you kind of get out of grad school. Like, hey, I'm going to start my own company. So we did. And we were really passionate about sports, and we ended up creating a line of protective gear that we licensed to Nike, and which was amazing, like coming out of school making something. And Nike got smart and said, hey, instead of licensing, how about we just hire you guys? So I ended up working at Nike. I didn't interview, it was just more like, I think this is like cool and would be great to work on more products. And Nike really was just And if you ever get a chance to visit the campus, just this amazing kind of, it's like a Disneyland of design, where everything is considered and every part of the culture is so passionate about product making and serving the needs of athletes. So that was such an influential, and I could go on and on about working at Nike, but I did have an opportunity to also work on new products, where I think another aspect of design that I really learned at Nike was how it's not enough to come up with more ideas. I think that's kind of like all of us know. It's like ideas are easy. It's actually how do you make ideas real, and be able to deliver on that promise. I think that's what I learned at Nike, going from a concept to making a product to scaling it to thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not millions of people. So I had a chance to work on new emerging technology. Oh, now that's going to sound really old. Like back then, everything I sound is so old because I'm retired. The only way you could tell the only way you could tell how you're doing when you're running is it's just you had a watch and you could count how many laps you did. That was about it. There was no like how fast do I run? What was my heart rate? Like the technology back then, especially in sport, was just emerging, and this concept of wearables and quantified self like was just emerging. So we worked on this little project called Nike Plus. We actually embedded a sensor in a shoe that allow you to track how fast you're running and how far you ran, and really opened up my eyes to this idea of how can you enhance an experience? How do you not just enhance the experience, but also, and now I'm going to get into like behavioral economics. Back then, I didn't even know what it was. Well, it was how do you motivate people to achieve their goals? Like if you could tell you how fast you run, hey, what if you give you training programs? What if you give you a way to achieve, maximize your potential? And that's when I started thinking about user journey and user experience, and which led me then to, wow, there's so much more you could do with technology. And if you could humanize it, and you could be customer-centric like at Nike, then you could create much more compelling experiences. And I joined Nike at the time where it was just starting to kind of rethink what design is. So I got to work on everything from, again, the Zune, which I think it's only in movies these days that people recognize that product. Guardian of Galaxy, yes. To Xbox, to working on Windows Phone, rethinking about what mobile is, to helping to lead the effort on Windows 10 design, to HoloLens, to our search experience with Bing, Microsoft Edge, our browser, to rethinking how AI can be implemented in our existing experiences, but also new experiences, to like, hey, I think it's time to get off the roller coaster and enjoy that privilege of being able to spend my time on what I want to pursue. So here I am now. Again, this seems so straightforward. There was a lot of back and forth and dead ends too. So by no means do I want to make it sound like the design journey is one easy steps. But at this phase, most of my time is focused on these areas. And again, retirement seems so passive. I feel like I gotta find a better term. It's about taking that next phase of the journey, perhaps, where you could just decide what the destination is. And for me, is being able to spend time with family and travel and explore and go to places I've never had a chance to, which I feel like just meeting people. I've never been to Champaign, Illinois, and William said, like, hey, you want to come? Sure, why not? I think teaching is such an enjoyable part of, even when I was working in a large company, I think a lot of leadership is about teaching. It's about helping people find their way, not necessarily providing an answer. So I've been advising the Dean of Design at Institute of Design on their program, and then writing, and I think with writing, once you start writing, you got to have a podcast. So I have 2 podcasts. Please hit subscribe. I'd love to get your feedback. One is called The Design Vault, where I take iconic products from the past and kind of showcase where they came from. a lot of 80s products, to a podcast I've been working on with Institute of Design called With Intent, where we focus on social impact products and companies. And then my writing is called Design Loft. And that was my old studio at Stanford, room 617. And with traveling, I think the other part is I didn't want to just travel kind of like, hey, I'm a tourist. I really want to meet with the community and listen and learn. And I'm fortunate working with Institute of Design. I've been hosting a series of global workshops, seminars, panels, focusing on responsible AI. Again, such a privilege. And so I was in 4 different cities around the world. I was in Auckland, New Zealand, where we focus on the impact of AI on democracy. In Tokyo, we're exploring mental health. And a lot of these themes came from our local partner teams, rather than saying like, hey, we want to go explore this. I think what I've learned is different countries, different contexts, different regions have very different perspective on the use of technology, but also what are the problems they can address. And with Pune, India, they were focused on upskilling, creating new opportunities, new pathways. And New York, we were discussing media literacy and the counterpoint to misinformation, and which is a challenging topic. And then we're working on creating a global summit next May to bring all these conversations together. So again, it's a privilege to be able to go to these different places and learn and hear the different perspective. The other part I want, like, one of the things I was so inspiring, like, we tend to look at design as very Western, right? This kind of design process. When you go to different places, I think design methodologies by and large are similar, but the local context really shaped design in new ways. Like when I was in New Zealand, I was just amazed at how we're working with the Design Institute of New Zealand, how the Maori culture is such a large part of New Zealand culture, and indigenous rights is such an important part and important part of the conversation, but also the rituals in their charter for Institute of Design. The Design Institute of New Zealand, they've incorporated Maori culture and principles. So this idea that, wow, even though we share common processes, that you can adapt design to be appropriate for the different culture and different region. And again, that's why I love exploring design. It's such a global part of our culture. Then now to the main part of the talk, navigating change. And this is the part I think, hopefully you don't take this as prescriptive. It's, again, more of a framework and more of a mindset. And change, the framework I tend to use, and some of you I'm sure are familiar with Kluber-Ross, her research work on how we all react to change. And I was talking to William and team about the importance of psychology, especially in design today, that we respond to change differently. Sometimes there's the fight or flight mode, but usually that initial response is a bit of shock to this denial, disbelief. If hopefully you work your way through that, eventually you kind of accept it and start integrating. And I think I tend to use this chart to illustrate that it's not necessarily a process, but at least it's different phases, and recognize that you can design really solutions for those different phases. Not necessarily a solution in terms of like, oh, I'm gonna make a product that's gonna address your shock, but really back to that user journey. Similarly, when you're trying to navigate change, think of that as a user journey, and these are the different phases. Instead of attracting or enticing people, you're trying to help them overcome this initial shock, and how would you design that experience? So that's what I mean by navigating change. It's not about giving you the answer, but at least giving you a framework to think about applying it into your design process. And the other aspect of change, this is so different. It didn't dawn on me that this was such a big part of my career and how I see change. It's really technology. Technology is so disruptive, and now it's such a big part of our lives and big part of our economy, really. And 2007, that's when I joined Microsoft. And does anyone remember what launched in 2007? I'm sure.
Facebook.
Close.
Xbox 360?
It was the iPhone, the first iPhone, like the little innocuous product. But what's interesting, and I only bring iPhone because it's such a defining moment. But technology goes in these big waves, right, and cycles. And you can say like, oh, before mobile revolution, there was the PC, there was the web, like internet. Like everyone remember like your first browser? Maybe you don't, but like the idea of like, wow, you get on the internet, and so you these big technology changes create these massive disruption, and some of it's amazing, some of it's disruptive, but also these cycles can create long-term impact that you don't even know. Obviously with mobile, and someone mentioned Facebook, like now you're constantly 24/7, you could access your phone. And as we all know by now, it can have both positive, you're constantly connected and you could be reached anytime. But also, as we know from all the research, and again, this is not controversial, literally I think social media, the social network, I think does fundamentally impact us cognitively. And those are the long-term effects that we're still dealing with those ramifications. So more and more, I start looking at technology as a driver for creating amazing new opportunities, but also it can have long-term unintended consequences that we have to think more about. So that's what I mean in terms of these big shifts. And for me, when I mentioned that product I worked in Nike, it was this idea of like, wow, like this idea of having an app with your product. This is like, it's almost actually, I feel like we've gone too far. Everything needs an app in order to work. Even your vacuum cleaner, your refrigerator needs an app. Or actually, the craziest one, I think it's like dishwasher, you need an app. But like everything's connected, and which is great. Again, it creates whole new capabilities, extends the user experiences, keeps us connected, and provides a new value. It's not just a running shoe, right? Now it can do much more. You're connected to a community of runners, which is exciting. But when I joined Microsoft, we were still trying to rethink about, we were in the PC era to like, wow, this new mobile era. And that's where my job was to like, hey, rethink the operating system for mobile. So I worked with a team to think about a new design system. So we developed Metro, which led to a lot of the Fluent work across Microsoft. So, and the thing I learned there is and this is I'm going to segue a bit. Like for large companies, the biggest challenge is actually not necessarily creating the product, is how do you make all the products that you have work together? That's a inherent kind of large scale when you have millions, if not billions, of customers across a portfolio of products, and many of your students, or maybe you're just graduating, you might be joining a company where you have existing products. Oftentimes, your job is to actually not to go create another product. It's actually make sure the current product works better, but also work across all the things that you've created already. And especially for UX, for industrial designers, I think it's something really hard to teach, because it's both system, but also trying to make sure you're creating a better solution. And oftentimes, that better solution, your customer might not appreciate it. Meaning, you might think it's better, but they don't actually want the change. And that's a real phenomenon at scale. That's so hard to teach. And so again, I was fortunate to be part of the team to help bring more coherence across our design with our design system, and led to more of the one Microsoft design approach. And a lot of that, again, it's really driven not just by design, but really with leadership of Satya, changing our focus from, hey, how do we make technology that's going to be more competitive, to how do we make sure we're focusing on the customer and working together to serve that customer's needs. That was a fundamental cultural change that I think has really helped propel Microsoft, help us find our way forward. So with Microsoft, I think we're able to go from this fun thing that like, oh, it's Clippy, to like, wow, we're going to create more expressive, engaging experiences that brings the best of Microsoft together to deliver to our customer. So I think it's been a great journey. I feel very fortunate to be part of that. The other part I was really, really fortunate to be part of was be able to kind of work with the team to define, hey, we get to shape technology in design, but I think one of the most unique aspect of design is we have such an amazing vantage point than any other discipline. Meaning, we're not just working on one product or one code base or one feature or one part of the system. We get to see the whole part. And with that, we can also see where the gaps are. And by working at scale, thinking about the impact, collaborating, we really want to step back and say, hey, what is our purpose? And our mission at Microsoft was to empower everyone to reach their potential with technology. And what we saw was sometimes, and oftentimes, technology is empowering, but also can exclude people from experiences. If you didn't have the economic means, you might not be able to access that technology. There's a big gap in access, but also I think from physical abilities. A lot of accessibility at that time when I joined Microsoft was seen as something that we have to make it accessible. It's something that you did at the end. We have to make sure, hey, our color contrast meets the appropriate specs. Like that's something we do at the end, or like screen readers, hey, does it work? Let's figure that out while we're about to ship. And so much of accessibility was focusing on hitting these metrics versus, hey, how do we make sure that we bring inclusion into our design process and make our products inclusive from the start? And back to that navigating design, reframe the opportunity that, hey, if we make products more inclusive and reduce exclusion or eliminate exclusion, then we could create benefits that applies to everyone. So this idea of bringing inclusion into our design process led into our inclusive design process. And this is an example of Xbox. The Xbox team took that mantra and created the Xbox Adaptive Controller Kit that allow people with different physical abilities to adapt it to their own needs rather than the one-size-fits-all approach to design. So I thought that was the Xbox team did amazing work. Likewise, the Surface team for PC, creating easier ways to access your laptop through low-cost means. This is the Microsoft Surface Adaptive Kit. Please check it out. And actually, our inclusive design toolkit is still downloadable. I'd love to have all of you try it out and use it. Bring it to your design practices. Again, it's about a path for you a way for you to navigate. It's not the answer. That's why we decided to do a toolkit, and that's why we decided to release it to make sure everyone have access to it. So shifting from this idea of purely usability to how do we think more about fairness, accountability, equality. I think these are the things that I think inclusion delivers. And I feel really, again, fortunate to be part of that. with that said, there were many lessons also I learned because people ask you like, oh, that sounds so like straightforward. You just bought inclusive design and you bought a design system. Like again, it makes it sound so easy. Like you just like tell people like, oh, this is what we want to do, and then everyone just listens to you. I wish design was that magical. Where there was this magic wand, you could just like say, hey, this is what we want to make, and everyone does it. And oftentimes there's this narrative, and it's a bit of a strange narrative, where you have this kind of hero designer, right? This is kind of this narrative that keeps on perpetuating, where someone like amazing. Again, this is not a critique on Dieter Rams, but so much of design is not about one individual with this passion, this vision that's going to stand up and say, this is the way. Rather, it's a large team working with many different disciplines, working together, hopefully, to achieve something greater. And I think that's so important to because it's hard to teach that. And I'm not talking about team projects, right? It's actually bigger than that. Excuse me. Because like good design, it's important to have a point of view, and again, this is not about critiquing an approach, but so much of our design work today is kind of moving systems, moving complexity, or helping to reduce complexity, figuring out what to make, and what, even more important, figuring out what not to make. And so these are a couple of lessons, and there's only 3, so it's not going to take too long. But the first lesson is this idea that it's not the hero designer, and it's the hero customer, right? Being user-centered. I think back to like Satya, back to One Microsoft, that was a big shift. There was this idea of that the hero, like, hey, my idea is better than your idea, and I'm going to make that happen. And it was like this competitive aspects. The hero culture works great if you just have a top-down CEO that's a genius, that can see the possibility and make it happen. But most organizations, most companies, most product teams aren't like that. And you really have to come together and celebrate the customer, the athlete, the person in the center is the customer, is the end user, and that's such a mantra that's so important to remind your team, to remind your students. I think the second lesson, and I don't know if this is a lesson or just my failure, but there was oftentimes I get this question like, hey, how does design get a seat at a table? As if there's this magical table somewhere. As long as you get a seat, and people will listen to you. And the superpower of design, I learned after many trials and a lot of failure, is actually make the table and then set the table. Like bring people into the tent. Design has this amazing power to show the what if. Like literally, show what the possibilities are. Don't say your idea is better, but rather, hey, bring people together through amazing our ability to collaborate, but also I think facilitate the conversation. Use design, the artifact, as a way to solicit feedback and bring people together. I think that's so much more powerful than saying like, hey, I need that seat at the table so that people will listen to me, right? Like I feel like at least that for me worked better when I was making it a table. And then the third lesson, and this is probably more applicable for design school, is it's easy to talk about design. Like I'm talking about design, but you have to show it. You have to show your design. You have to make it. Don't like. I think it's important to ground your work, and be able to tell the story. But at the end of the day, the design has to speak for itself too, and has to work, and that's so important. And which leads me to, like, what do you show? I think you have to show the impact. Like, how is this going to make it better for your customers' lives, your end user? Not just like, hey, we could sell more of this, right? Like, I think that's it's kind of like design success traditionally was this, and everyone's, hopefully you're familiar with the DVF framework. We tend to focus on desirability, and business is focusing on viability, and engineering and the product team is focused on feasibility. And I think that works really well in kind of existing product context. But I do think it's starting to shift, where I think desirability, like, it's really about creating that emotional connection. It's really about relationship in some form. And I learned that, especially in digital product, like it's not about just getting it on the shelf and they buy and they consume it. It's about back to that user journey. How do they come back, and how do you build that relationship? How do you continue to add value? I think there's so much more now. I think viability is it's not enough just to make money. I think more and more we talk about what is delivering success, what are the outcomes that you want, what's the customer success, and I think and sometimes I talk about design for the curve, because technology is always changing. Viability, like everyone talks about AI today. Like how do you make money? What's a business? Like I feel like there's still emerging conversation about that. What's that curve going to be? And then I think the feasibility, to me, oftentimes tends to be about the technical capabilities versus quality of the experience, the craftsmanship. I think that's an aspect that I try to really focus on, at least for my design role. And the emerging area that I want to spend more time on, and that's why I've been focused on these seminars around the world, is really the I believe is the fourth circle, or the additional elements. It's about impact. How do we want to make sure, back to inclusion, empowering everyone? What is our responsibility? How do you make things sustainable? And how do you address exclusion? I think we have to think more and more about the impact of our products in our customers' lives. Not only is the solution successful and serves that need, but what are the long-term impact of what we create? So I do think this emerging fourth circle, and hopefully you can help me frame this. We were debating, is it in the center? No, that's the customer. Is it like distributed? Is it like a bunch of little circles all around it? Is it embedded in one? But whatever it is, but I do think at least the current model is insufficient, and we should consider areas like social impact, sustainability, racial justice, income inequality, especially with new emerging tech, and then product equity. So I think these are the other attributes that more and more, at least I found, are in the vernacular of designers' conversation, and I'm really excited to see how we adopt some of these into our practices. So with that said, I think this is a bit jarring transition, because that last circle and impact, and I talked about long term, like the current conversation in AI is really important. It's such a fundamental change, and back to that the Kubler-Ross curve. Like most of us are in I see more in the anxiety side. Like, wow, AI, it's like in the movies, right? The trope is, it's gonna be like a Terminator or a replicant, or you're gonna fall in love with it and it's gonna break your heart, and that's kind of like the in some ways mass culture does shape our viewpoints. Fortunately, unfortunately, that's been the case for last century since mass media. But I think hopefully I think designers' role is to help navigate the impact of technology like AI. It's not necessarily about making more things, like I said, but about what is that impact. And I think for me is, especially at this phase, I think we're still in this kind of, a lot of people I've seen like in that denial, like, hey, I don't want to try AI, it's going to replace my job. Like there's this kind of tension I'm seeing also. and I think design needs to kind of help bridge that, so that it's not about AI and technology, it's not about displacing, versus how do we make sure that we're creating equitable experiences, that we are thinking about creating skills, or how do we use AI in a way that actually creates those tangible benefits in people's real lives, not just to make cat pictures. I love cats, by the way. No, hopefully no one on the audience will do anything horrible. But I think navigating that change curve is through, I think rethinking about, in some ways, our purpose as designers. That we are shifting to what do we want to change to, I think it's even more important to how do we give meaning to a lot of these things that's emerging. Again, it's not necessarily about making more things. I think a lot of AI is about existing products. That's what's going to happen, especially Gen AI, as you've seen today. It's not going to displace, but versus like, it's going to augment, or it's going to extend or enhance existing products. And there is so much hype, and some of you might be familiar with this Gartner hype cycle. And again, AI has been in the conversation for probably, depends how far you want to go back to Turing. But at least the kind of common taxonomy has probably been in the last 30 years in our perception of what AI as being this intelligence that's going to be as smart as us. But there's so much hype, and I think it's starting to lose its meaning when people say it's AI, because it's on everything, right? It's like Tabasco sauce, I guess, or salt. I don't know. Whatever condiment you want to use, sriracha. But it's like we're sprinkling on everything, literally like on a golf club. It's this brand, whatever you want to call it, but like this, we're trying to communicate that there's more value because it has AI, which I think it's well, in some ways it's kind of dangerous because when you do that, it loses all meaning, and I think that meaning is so important. Where for a lot of us, especially in coming from industrial design, product design, we tend to be tool makers. We make the thing that helps you do the job better. That was the meaning we were giving. Like literally, we'll make a device that's going to help you type faster. We'll make a device that'll wash your dishes. Like those, we make tools, and that was the meaning. Like we were going to make a better mechanical pencil, and I think we're starting to lose meaning in the things that we create. And that's something that I want to make sure that we help navigate by creating meaning, and I think some of that loss of meaning is because we know how to make so much. Like we're this amazing. Like we have 3D printer. Everyone's got a 3D printer. Like in every school, we can make anything now. But what to make, I think, is still the challenge. Like with AI and with a lot of these emerging tech. So I do believe, and I do subscribe to this, where our role is to close that gap and to help navigate between that gap, and be able to find that path, saying, hey, these are the things that's going to give meaning, and help our customers, help people understand the value, but also create a solution that will address those needs. And I think ultimately when we do that, that our Venn diagram will emerge where we can use it and help us fill that gap. That more and more of our job is to decide what to make and what to change through frameworks like this. So hopefully, the students here and the faculty will start bring more of this thinking into the way we design, but also the outcomes that we can achieve. And ultimately, I think if you look at the different eras of design, I think we are emerging or starting to emerge a new era. And again, I'm not trying to do design history 101 here. I'm happy to teach that class. I love it. But the classic industrial design was Elliott Nose doing I think it was 1961 IBM Selectric. Like, hey, this is industrial design. We're gonna make products that's gonna help you be more productive and shape technology. To I think the user-centered design, universal design, Devin Starr at Smart Design, Oxo Grid Grips. Like, I think the design of everyday things, like Don's book, like really changed our view of what design is. It wasn't just this industrial design. It was a design of things that made our lives better. I think the era of personal computers and digital technology was another era of design, especially industrial design. And of course, like I think Jonathan Ives' work really showcases the power of industrial design to humanize, to make technology approachable. And with the dawn of like new devices and new technology like AR, VR, robotics, I feel like there's so much that's coming that more and more industrial design is to give shape and form to solve problems, but also give meaning to what we make. And this next example, I think, is just a glimpse of how we can shape technology and give it more meaning through those things that we make. And let's see this play, and it's a prototype called Be My AI, and you can check it out. Hopefully this will play. I don't think sound's working here, but hopefully it'll play.
I'm Andy Lane from Be My Eyes, and I'm about to take a journey that may change lives around the world. Vision is such a dominant sense for most of us. Our eyes feed us an endless stream of information, but it is somewhat different for me. I'm blind, so I've had to learn new skills and use workarounds to live my life without sight. I still think visually, but I have to build the images in my mind through other means. Today, though, I'm experiencing something new. I'm using OpenAI's newest model and voice-first interface to imagine the world through a conversation with an AI.
Nice sunglasses. They definitely add a cool factor.
Oh, thank you. What is in front of me at the moment?
You're looking at a beautiful sunny day by the River Thames in London. Right in front of you is the Tower Bridge, one of the most famous bridges in the world, with its majestic twin towers and blue suspension cables.
That's perfect. Can you tell me if the bridge is up or down at the moment?
The bridge is down.
Yeah, so it's a little glimpse, but like, wow, such a powerful, when you can see the world using technology that can infer what's around you and describe it to you when you can't see. Like, that's a very powerful capability. On the flip side, like, hey, what about privacy and what if it recognizes people that you don't want to be recognized? And it opens up a whole new areas of question about what should we make and what should we not make, or how do we put safeguards in it so that you're still protecting people's privacy? So again, and how do you, is this something you wear? Is this something you bring with you? Like, I think there's so many opportunities, and this is just a small example, but so much more about our ability to interact with the real world through the technology. I think we, especially industrial design, is the mediator between the digital world and the physical world. And I feel like that's such a powerful era of design that sometimes we might not even see it until literally until we experience it. So that, at least I think that's what's going to be emerging or has emerged. And I think the impact of AI and the other one to recognize is, and it's been so much hype from Jensen Huang, but I think here's why in some ways that AI does democratize design in some ways, like where everyone, it's like, yeah, anyone can cook, but who's going to be the great chef and who's going to have the great recipes? I think that's the difference where I think jobs will change. Maybe some of those jobs can be automated, but I think especially in fields where there's going to be more domain expertise, but also a combination, especially design, has this amazing ability to be generalist but also specialist. And I think that adaptability of designers is going to be key. But also this idea of, I think, design, back to sense making, our ability to bring empathy into the design process by being user-centered, I think having that critical thinking, but also I think so much more about humanities is what's going to shape meaning. And I think, and I do think design is really at that intersection between the humanities and the sciences. And that's so critical for the future. So with that, I think we need to help make sense of where this technology is going. And ultimately, I think in order to do that, also encourage everyone to jump in. I know it's probably some of your students are already using like AI tools in their classroom or in their schoolwork. Instead of saying like no, like how do we make sure we're adapting and using it in a way that augments and allows them to experiment and learn, but also when things fail and it's not right, then how do you help them find the right path? But it's important to jump in. That was VizCon, by the way. If some of you probably play around with it now, and it's actually getting better and better in terms of actually being able to as a design tool. So some of the takeaways and just wrapping it up. And I don't have 4 easy lessons, like 5 bullet points, but again, this is more of a framing and use some of those frameworks to help you navigate. I think the Clipper-Ross part is, for me, it's about sense making in different phases of that journey for your customer or for your team even. And I think more and more of our purpose as designers is figuring out what to make and what do we want to change, rather than making more things. And then I think desirability, feasibility, and viability, I think we have to think about the impact. We can't just make the thing and say, hey, we've done our job because we made a better solution. And then creating meaning. I think keeping human at the center obviously is important, but helping our customer understand what the meaning is, how does it improve their lives, and help them through that change is also part of our job now. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time, for your patience. So let's all jump in and navigate change together. And really thank you all for having me join you at this amazing campus.
All right. Is my mic okay? Good.
Yeah, Q&A.
Q&A. Yes.
Q&A. Is there a bonus round? Bonus points? Do I get to eat if I answer like?
Right. So we have some duplicate questions, so I kind of mixed them together. So the first question kind of it going to transition from, let's not do a super harsh transition, but we got to know each other when I was at school, and yes.
That was what, 20 years ago? Like.
Oh yeah, 20 months ago.
Oh, 20 months. That was 20 years ago.
So you were, but the interesting thing is your role. You weren't the teacher, right? You were we call advisor, and that brings the question is, like you said you retired from the industry, but now you're in the education sector, right? But you are not doing education as a typical professor or teacher. So what? First of all, what are you doing, and then why do you think this?
Oh, I like teaching. I enjoy teaching. Back to, I think in some ways, as a leader, you have to be a teacher, especially in a large company and in a corporate world. You can't just tell people like go do this, right? And I think a teacher is really Well, I subscribe to this idea of like the servant leadership, like you're here to serve, and I think teachers are amazing, and they have this ability to understand the students' need, but also help them find the way. So what I've been doing, I think, especially in education, is to back to that DVF and impact. How can I influence, but also work with different design institutes, educational institutes, organizations, to create new ways of designing. Not new ways, but at least adapt our approach to design so that we can help navigate this change that's emerging, or continue to navigate this change. So in some ways, my role is, it's not about like, hey, working with any one school. I feel like design education in the broadest sense, how can I contribute and contribute to this course and work with different schools and different organizations.
I see, yeah. And you mentioned being a leader, right? Then what would you say, what advice would you give for educators to educate design leaders?
Yeah, it's a
You know, instead of just, as you said, not just making things, but
yeah.
leading within
I mean, this whole curriculum we could, and I think some programs have developed whole curriculums on leadership, especially at the master's level. But my advice is, and this is hard to. I'll talk about myself and then try to extrapolate. Like when I first started working at Microsoft, I didn't have a team. I was an individual contributor. Like I was an IC, they call it. And in some ways, I didn't want to manage. I know it seems kind of weird. You know, after managing like 400 or 500 people, but like there was this kind of dichotomy or choice that, wow, if I have to manage people, like I'm not gonna get to do design. I'm just managing all day. That's no fun. Like I want to design and make things, and more and more, like it took me a long time to kind of understand, like in some ways you're still designing, but you're designing the system. Like is that
yeah.
like really thinking more about like working with the team.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna steal one from Satya. He calls it like the global maxima. How do you like make sure like everyone's working on the design so that it could, the sum of the parts is greater than like it could create something greater together. And I feel like that approach to design I've always gravitated towards. And I think back to some of those lessons I share is to bring people together so that you can achieve more together. And I find that very rewarding than what I could just do by myself. So learning that took a long time for me.
Kind of reminds me of, so there's this film director from Korea called Park Chan-wook.
Oh yeah, of course.
He said, people ask him why movie instead of other art forms, right? And he said, doing a movie, and which I think is similar to leading design leader.
Yeah.
He said it's like you are painting something standing 50 feet away, and you have 50 people holding 50 different brushes, and you're painting that thing on the wall. And he gave that. I think that
sounds frustrating.
Yeah.
Though.
Well, but he said when it works. Actually, he said usually it doesn't work, right? But he said when it works, that's real art. Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Let's jump into this elephant in the room question. There's so many questions about AI here. So it really, what they're asking is, how do you, you talked about ethical, making impact using generative AI. What would you say, advice on leveraging generative AI as a technology, but also ensuring the human-centered aspect in the design. So not making it tech-centered while still keeping human-centered, but also using that technology to help that process.
Yeah, and that's why, like, through the responsible AI seminars and workshop we did in different parts of the world, I really learned a lot on different approach. Like, you do have to look at the context is so important because when we talk about technology, we tend to like assume like, oh, it works the same everywhere, where it's very different. So you take like in the areas of democracy and AI, in the workshop, what we did was we broke it down to different end users. So let's say someone is an immigrant who just moved to or immigrated to New Zealand. How would they navigate the voting process? Like, do I need to register, or how does this parliamentary system work? Is my MP like using it as like educational tool, and that in that context, I think AI can really enhance. On the flip side, hey, when AI can, create deep fakes of politicians, and how do you create safeguards so that the deep fakes don't influence people and how they vote? I think that context, that scenario is also important. So that's what I mean by designers are really good at is understand that context, understand that meaning, and then help create those scenarios. And the big differences in design approach I've realized, especially in Gen AI, as we kind of think about like ethics, so much of our design, the way we were taught design, at least I was taught design, is you look at the ideal scenario, like the golden path, like everything just works, right? You design the best, like, hey, wow, they find your product, they unpacked it, and they figure out how to use it. They never read the manual, it just works, and there's no bugs, and you remember your password so you can log in easily, and everything just works smoothly. But more and more, I think design is about, those dead ends when things don't work, and the frustration people have. And I feel like that's really important to work on. Two, I think back to ethics, when and this is a strange thing to say, when you have bad users.
Bad users.
Meaning people who do.
Are we allowed to say that?
Yeah. Well, no. Meaning people. There are harmful actors that will try to disrupt the system.
Oh, I see.
Like hackers or however you want to call it, the harm. And you have to design for those users, right? Because we always think of users like oh, they're going to do empowering things and do good with what we create. What if they don't, and they do use it for harmful purposes? And I think more design also have to think about those scenarios. And so oftentimes I don't see a lot of designers think about those scenarios or those type of users. And when I say bad, that's a very judgmental term. So let's say bad actors or harmful or actors.
Bad intentions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you've probably seen the evolution of this organizational structure and how designers sit in that, right? I remember Carlos Teixeira at yeah. He said design. Well, I guess in the 90s, early 2000s, design consultancies were big, right? IDEO.
Well, no, when I graduated school, the cool job was like to work at a design agency. Oh, I want to work at Frog, at IDEO.
Yeah. And Carlos, he said, well,
what was it? Dublin was
Dublin,
in
yeah. But look at now, all these consultancy. I mean, they're still around, but I don't think they're nearly as famous as before, right?
That's a touchy topic for my friends.
So Carlos said, too bad we don't have a whiteboard here, but he used to draw, right? He just draw. The traditional design process is you put designers as a piece in the linear development. It's really linear, right? And then later you have like agile everything. And now he said designers are moving more into in-house teams instead of consulting. And he draw a map like it's almost like a chessboard. So you're putting up pieces instead of jumping into a team.
Well, I guess Steve Jobs created a lot of jobs for designers. Well, I think it's like literally. I think you see that era of in-house design was, and this goes even all the way back to IBM. IBM, Herman Miller, like traditional industrial design was through partnership with independent designers. It's like, what's the, Elliot knows I mentioned Paul Rand, like a lot of these amazing designers were from the agency side and then you start building in-house capabilities.
Yeah.
I think what changed was, with Apple and that product making, a lot of people recognize that, wow, we need to create that capability internally. And I think that rise of in-house design was that appreciation of the value of design to actually create innovation. And I think it was more of the innovation drive, meaning, wow, we could be more competitive if we have design inside a company to help us innovate. And that's why I think, to Carlos's point, like moving upstream in the design process or the development process to actually generate new opportunities, generate new value for your customer, which ultimately generates growth for your business, which is what companies want. And that's why they're willing to invest. And that's why we saw the rise of in-house design in all the big tech companies and even a lot of startups.
Yeah, I guess it's, I kind of see it as design first started, and then companies don't see the value yet, so they kind of work independently, and then when they see the value, design kind of changed from, like you said, the hero type into a capacity in the organization.
Well, into a discipline,
right?
just like other functions
Yeah.
that you have in an organization. I do think centralized design, design team that brings together the different product areas. I think that's probably a shift that's still some companies prefer to have different product teams with different design teams. Some prefer to have it bring it all together. It really depends on what your goal is as a business. And I do think the value has been shown and continues to be shown that having designers that sits next to you, your engineer sits next to your developer, working together hand in hand to bring ideas together. I think when I say design, also I mean research and broadly all the
Big design. Huh?
Yeah, big D.
Yeah.
I think that's how you really create value for your customer.
And do you also see kind of all these famous design thinking and people outside of design coming to learn? So design is even more.
Right? Wow, that's a
big topic.
No, that's a landmine. Design thinking.
Right. I'm putting a quote on that. Yeah.
No, I think I think it's important. I think because when I went to Stanford, like IDEO, I think was a big part of the community, and a lot of the teachers were from IDEO, and a lot of my friends worked at IDEO, and I think design thinking really enable, and this is the part I think it's so important we lose sight, is the first part of design thinking. It's about empathy, and I feel like that part gets lost because it's about the process and the diagrams and everyone's a design. No, the most important part about design thinking for me, especially in bringing inside a company, is about creating empathy and generating that awareness that, wow, what you do will impact customers' lives. And I see like that in some ways got lost because of the pushback on design thinking as being like, oh, we're making everyone design. No, we're trying to make sure everyone in the organization has empathy for the customer. That customer obsession that I talked about, I think that is the critical part that I think we might have lost sight of.
Yeah, it's also the hardest part to teach, right?
Well, to teach, but also like to bring in to invest in. Like literally at Microsoft, we had customer touch points where we set up like, hey, even if you're an engineer, you still have to go meet with your customer once a quarter and just talk to a human that's going to be using a product, so that when something don't work, like you can see that frustration. It's not just like, oh yeah, we'll get to that bug later.
Yeah, when they see their work getting destroyed, right? They will.
Or back to impacting
Yeah.
real people. I think
Yeah.
that's such an important part of empathy, is to realizing that the things you do can affect, will affect people.
And we have that conversation just covered a few questions here. So this question is interesting. How would you work? What is this? Yeah. So the context is every person, every team has weaknesses. And how do you navigate through and with weaknesses?
Wow, this sounds like an interview question. How do I navigate through weaknesses?
Oh yeah, right.
Wow.
Right.
Well, my only weakness is I work too hard, William.
Right, that's a classic answer.
Yeah, I just can't. I
Yeah,
can't.
workaholic.
I can't.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
No, I think. Look, you want the team to be high performing, right? And I think the way I try to frame up is like, hey, first and foremost, is about having a shared purpose.
Yeah.
Like, we're in this together. We're here because, wow, we have this opportunity. We wake up in the morning because we believe in that purpose. And that, as a leader, that's what you want to bring. If certain parts of the organization or certain areas is not working as well, you really have to think about the team. Like, hey, what are the capabilities? It's not the individual as opposed to the capabilities. At least I found. Again, obviously, there are cases when people might not be performing due to different reasons. But if sometimes what I found is like, hey, are you really clear on what the capabilities you need in your organization to be successful? And how do you develop that within your team? How do you bring that on if you don't have that internally? Like, I think that's the conversation you have about performance, rather than like, oh, this person is not working out, which in some cases there are, but that's more of a manager-employee relationship, rather than as a leadership. What my job is to make sure that we have a shared collective purpose, that we're performing, that if we don't have the capabilities, how do we make sure we have those capabilities in order to deliver success?
And the next question is actually about interview. So there's a question says, how do you stand out in the job market when doing interview?
Wow, this is such a. I feel like I should be teaching portfolio class now.
I think they assume.
I know, but like I tend to treat everything like a design process, right? Like if you're designing something for end user or a customer or organization, you always want to focus on like, hey, what are their needs, right? Like, what's the gap? And I sometimes I feel like when I see portfolios, people like just create the generic, which is fine. Again, people don't have time, but be a bit more specific and more targeted. Like, if I'm applying for a certain job, like, tailor your portfolio for that job, so that if they have a gap, show how your capabilities fulfill that gap, and really tailor your presentation towards that gap. So get towards that need. And again, I'm making it sound very easy. It's a lot of work. I think the other part is, and this is back to like we're doing a crit in your serial class today. Like, show how your solution is better than other. Meaning, show how you're better. Differentiate yourself. Like, hey, wow, I'm gonna show you a portfolio where like, wow, I'm really strong at the research, understanding customer needs, here's my methodology. I understand both quant and qual. Like, hey, that's my strength. Show where you differentiate, but also sometimes show your differentiation in the ways about like, hey, I could communicate, I could collaborate, like I could work. Here's how I deal with ambiguity. Like, really try to differentiate yourself and from other applicants or other students. I feel like that's sometimes kind of not in the conversation versus like, oh, yeah, the portfolio, like especially with Gen AI, everything looks great, and actually my worry is everything looks the same.
But it's the differentiation part that's going to be trickier and trickier.
Yeah, the AI is all about the mean, average, and jumping.
Yeah,
out of the-
statistically,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
the optimized to the highest probability.
Right. Okay, that covers all the online problems here.